What are some of the most unbelievable crimes people will commit? Let's find out. Starting with number 6, fully brainwashed. Abigail Lee Kemp was sentenced to 10 years in prison for her role in a string of brazen robberies back in 2016. However, the story of how her gang pulled these robberies off is a little weird because Abigail didn't bother wearing a mask to cover her face. When details of the investigation began to leak, everyone realized that Abigail was a different sort of thief entirely. She must have thought she was invincible or something, because not only did she not wear a mask, but she also took very little precautions in covering her tracks. She used her own phone during the robberies and also used a relative's car as a getaway car. In fact, it was only way later that she even bothered painting the vehicle to disguise it. You're probably thinking that Abigail was some slick criminal mastermind who had a good plan. But no, you think there's no way someone would try to rob places without at least trying to hide their identity. That'd just be dumb. But as it turns out, Abigail was that dumb. The robberies were pretty simple. Abigail would waltz into a jewelry store with a weapon, force all the employees to the back of the store, secure them with zip ties, and then rob the store of the valuables it had. Then she would be gone as soon as she arrived. She pulled this off a total of 5 times, and prosecutors say she stole up to $4 million in jewelry. And of course, she had some help. She was taught to rob jewelry stores by 3 guys: Larry Bernard Gilmore, Louis Jones III, and Michael Bernard Gilmore. So Jones and the Gilmore brothers actually taught Abigail how to commit armed robbery. They taught her how to handle a weapon, what disguises to use, and even showed her what stores she should rob. They also helped with her surveillance and security outside the store. Unfortunately, Abigail was one of those people who hear you, but they don't listen. She didn't rob the stores with a disguise, and the police were able to get tips about her identity, and they even got her name. The fact that she often used the same getaway car owned by a relative, which was used to confirm her identity, really shows how little thought she put into this. In fact, the police caught Abigail when she walked into a jewelry store, and the store's manager thought she matched the description of the famed robber without a disguise. Police were called, and she was promptly arrested. Abigail was sentenced to 10 years, and she actually cried at her sentencing. Too bad. She should have thought about that before she decided to be bad at robbing places. Number 5, the fake baseball player. A criminal impersonating baseball player Trey Turner scammed an unnamed 70-year-old fan out of $50,000 through Facebook. The scam began when the victim, who's a longtime baseball fan, defended Turner online after a not-so-great game. That night, a Facebook account claiming to be Turner texted the woman, thanked her for her support, and told her to download Google Chat to continue the conversation. What this victim didn't know was that Google Chat is the app of choice for many overseas scammers who carry out romance scams. So she unknowingly downloaded the app, connected with this creep, and the messages got even weirder. As the two continued to chat, the imposter gradually started sharing personal details and photos of Turner's wife and family to convince his victim that he was the real deal. After about 3 weeks, the fake Turner then said he loved the woman. Of course, this sounded ridiculous to the 70-year-old victim, who knew she was decades older than Turner. Then he eventually told her what he wanted. Apparently, fake Turner was having problems with his wife and needed some help to keep it quiet. And you guessed it, that help involved the victim sending money. Sadly, the woman somehow fell for his lies and started sending him small sums through different channels. For long, all added up to $50,000. And that is when the woman realized she had been scammed. The woman immediately went to the police and they started an investigation. Sadly, they realized that the scam was unlikely to be local and was probably the work of overseas scam artists. Thankfully, the victim got some of her money back and wasn't financially ruined like many victims of these types of scams are. And not to really come down on the victim here, but we're not entirely sure how someone can claim to be a longtime baseball fan and fall for this. If you don't follow sports, or if you're just peripherally aware and kind of follow a team, we'd understand. But Turner signed a $300 million contract in 2022, just 1 year before this scam, and it was pretty big news in the sports world. Someone who cared enough to go online and defend defend Turner after a game would probably know this. So it's a little weird that they'd believe he needed money. But denial is a powerful thing, and for whatever reason, she unfortunately did fall for it. We're just glad for her that it wasn't worse. Number 4, blowing taxpayer money fast. Michael Lucchesi used his position as a top doctor at SUNY Medical Center in New York to steal over $1 million from public funding through unauthorized credit card use. According to prosecutors, Lucchesi lived a really pretty lavish life while he worked at the center, stealing roughly $1.5 million. The crazy thing was that he only got exposed because an audit was carried out after he retired from the center. When Lucchesi worked at SUNY, he held several important top positions, such as the chairman of emergency medicine, acting head of the hospital, and even the chief medical officer at one point. This was the pretext Lucchesi used to spend a fortune of the government's money on his personal worries. Lucchesi was entrusted with access to accounts with significant funds, and he used funds from those accounts to pay for things such as his pet care, travel, and even membership at the New York Sports Club. Prosecutors say that Lucchesi spent $176,000 on pet care, including paying for a luxury pet resort for his furry friend. He also paid $109,000 in membership fees at the New York Sports Club. He then paid out $115,000 in cash advances. He also spent around $348,000 on personal travel. But wait, there's more. The good doctor also spent $52,000 on catering and $46,000 for his children's tuition payments. There were also payments for liquor, flowers, and electronics. The shocking thing was that he stole so much in just 6 years when he had access to those accounts and no one noticed. Dr. Lucchesi couldn't get away with his crimes forever. An audit carried out after he retired revealed the massive scale of his fraud, and he'll have to explain his conduct in court. His lawyers didn't dispute the receipts of Lucchesi's spending, but they claim that the funds weren't stolen and something more complicated happened. As of the release of this video, Dr. Lucchesi has been charged with first and second degree grand larceny, first degree falsifying business records, third degree criminal tax fraud, and other criminal counts, and is awaiting his day in court. We guess we'll all just have to wait and see what extraordinary circumstances are going to justify stealing all that money. We're pretty sure his lawyers are working to come up with a pretty impressive, absurd excuse. Number 3, reselling military gear. Jessica Smith, an Army veteran, was sentenced to 18 months in prison for stealing military equipment worth $2.1 million from Fort Hood in Texas. In addition to her prison sentence, she was ordered to pay nearly $1.3 million in restitution to the U.S. Army. Following her prison term, she'll also have 2 years of probation. But Smith doesn't have the means to pay the entire restitution up front, so the court ordered her to pay in installments. While in prison, she'll pay $25 per quarter. After her release, Smith will then be required to pay $250 per month, but at that rate, it would take her over 400 years to pay off the debt. Smith and her co-conspirators had decided to sneak into Fort Hood, break into some shipping containers, steal items such as scopes, night vision devices, and radios, and they were successful. When the military discovered that locks had been cut on 17 Connect shipping containers, they ordered an investigation. The investigation revealed that 72 scopes, 60 radios, 3 night vision devices, and 2 receiver transmitters had been stolen. These items were worth around $2.1 million. One investigator decided to search the internet to see if the items would turn up, and wouldn't you know it, they did. Somebody was trying to sell a thermal scope for sale on eBay for $4,500. The investigator matched the serial number on the thermal scope to the Fort Hood theft, and Smith was quickly apprehended. Her co-conspirators were caught as well. The investigators also reviewed security footage and found Smith entering the base on the night that the theft was carried out. It was an open and shut case, and Smith had no choice but to plead guilty. Number 2, the Mayoral Hopeful. In 2022, Whitfield Leland was a mayoral candidate for Tallahassee, and in 2024, he became a criminal robbing a Dollar General. Back in 2022, when Leland ran for office, he was a political unknown who came third in a 4-man primary race and only won about 5% of the votes. But his trajectory has gotten worse since then. The saga began when a witness saw Leland pull a weapon on the terrified manager of a dollar store. He then ransacked the register, stuffing all the cash in his pockets, which which, how much could that have been? $250? He told the manager to open the safe, but the safe was time delayed in order to discourage armed robberies. Leland then said he should have remembered that the safe had a delayed opening from the last time, which means this wasn't the first time he robbed that Dollar General, and that's a weird thing to admit, right? At that point, police had already arrived on the scene. Fortunately, Leland already had a genius plan to escape, which involved wearing an employee shirt and leaving the store real casual-like. And when the police saw Leland in the shirt, they did think he was an employee, so his disguise was working. But then he took off running, and the police went after him. And Leland had so much cash in his pockets that it started comically falling out and made a trail that made it easy for the police to track him to where he was hiding in the woods. Leland is facing multiple charges for crimes, and as of the release of this video, Leland is still awaiting trial. The arrest adds to his previous legal troubles, including a prior conviction for resisting arrest in 2019. Crazy thing was that his escape plan seems like it would have worked if he had played it cool. You'd never expect a former mayoral candidate to rob a store, let alone a Dollar General of all things. But hey, Florida man is going to do Florida man things, right? If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay tuned right here to find out just how they took over this doctor's life. Number 1, the naughty judge. Judge Dawn Gentry had the time of her life while she worked as a family court judge. She had illicit romps with underlings, ruled against attorneys who rejected her advances, and even let her staff drink in the courthouse. This is the story of one of the craziest judges you'll ever hear about. The complaints against Dawn Gentry generally concern a curious relationship she has with her case specialist, a man named Stephen Penrose. The complaints say that Gentry and Penrose and Gentry's secretary Aubrey engaged in physical intimacy at the same time in Gentry's office. There were even testimonies that people in the building at the time heard all the huffing and puffing inside the office. And to make things even more complicated, Gentry's ex-husband claims that Gentry was having an affair with Penrose while they were married. There were also claims that Gentry only hired Penrose after forcing another staffer, Meredith Smith, to resign. These complaints and other adjacent complaints of gross misconduct became so serious that the Kentucky Judicial Conduct Commission held a hearing to decide Judge Gentry's fate, and the testimonies at the hearing were shocking. When Aubrey, the secretary who was supposedly the third participant in this office romance, was called to the stand, she had an interesting story to tell. She claimed that she had heard about the rumors of her being intimate with Gentry and Penrose, so they decided that the best way to get rid of that rumor was to just play into it. Apparently, accepting the rumors involved going into Gentry's office and moving the chairs and tables noisily so that people would think the three were being physically intimate. She also said that Penrose was making suggestive noises to that effect. Turning the whole thing into a prank is probably the worst way to dispel a rumor that people truly believe. But Aubrey said it was just to get tongues wagging and give them something to really talk about. But the list of Gentry's misconduct hardly stops there. She was also accused of ruling against attorneys who didn't give in to her demands, and one of those attorneys was Catherine Schultz. Ms. Schultz had a very interesting story to tell as well when she was called to testify against Gentry. She claimed that Gentry had propositioned her for, let's just call it a fun time with Penrose, an idea she refused. She said that Gentry texted her through Snapchat and asked her again and again to be involved intimately with her and Penrose. And even though Schultz declined several times, she persisted. Eventually, Schultz relented and kissed Gentry on one occasion. But when that didn't lead to the expected triple treat with Penrose, Gentry got angry and decided that she would rule against Schultz every time she had the chance. This threat made Schultz so anxious that she ended up in the ER and resigned from her position on some board she was serving on with Gentry. The crazy thing is these are just some of the complaints against Gentry. There are also suggestions that she ruled against attorneys who didn't donate the maximum amount to her election campaign. And people who work in the court premises say they've seen bottles of alcohol lying around Gentry's office as well. So what about Penrose? Well, he resigned from his position as case specialist shortly after the investigation was made public. Despite being subpoenaed, he refused to attend the hearing. At the end of its deliberations, the Judicial Conduct Commission unanimously agreed to remove Judge Gentry from her position. Her lawyers, of course, called this a miscarriage of justice and claimed that only the people who have the power to remove a judge from her position. Her lawyers claim that only the public should have that vote, but the decision of the Judicial Conduct Commission will stand for now, and we doubt anyone would argue with them. If even a tenth of these complaints are true, it seems like Judge Dawn Gentry shouldn't have ever been a judge judge at all, since it looks like she has some bad judgments. Who are some of the most heartless scammers? Let's get right into it with number 3, the doctored doctor. Anthony Flores and Anna Moore preyed upon a mentally ill Malibu doctor, pumping him full of mind-altering substances so they could defraud him of millions, right up until he passed away. Dr. Mark Sawich had an estate worth $60 million and sadly had gradually lost the ability to care for himself due to a mental illness. Sawich could no longer perform surgery or look after himself as he injured his hands during an attempt where he tried to end everything for himself. His only immediate family members were his mother and sister, who both lived in Florida, much too far away to offer any sort of care. Sawich had been 2 weeks out of another stint in a mental rehabilitation center when he met hairdresser Anthony Flores and aspiring actress Anna Moore at an ice cream parlor in June 2017. Sawich chatted with the couple and invited them to his beachfront home so they could see the sunset. There must have been a pretty fast connection, since Sawich also handed them the keys to his Tesla that night so they could drive it for the weekend trip to Yosemite National Park. Sawich had been to jail multiple times for violent outbursts during manic episodes. Less than a month after meeting the couple, he was imprisoned again on a battery charge. Sawich was jailed that night and underwent 6 days of psychiatric care before he contacted his new friends, Flores and Moore, to bring him home. Sawich's friendship with Moore and Flores, as you might expect, was tumultuous. The couple had moved in with him early on, but after 3 weeks, Sawich called the police to escort them out. Sawich then texted a friend saying that the pair were tax fraud criminals that tried to steal his Tesla and home. But Sawich's legal troubles continued, and he was arrested and detained in an LA County jail after another severe mental breakdown not long after. Flores convinced the doctor to grant him power of attorney so he could withdraw enough money from Sawich's accounts to post bail and help him get his life on track. Sawich was so excited and grateful for his freedom that he invited the couple to move back in with him. With all of Sawich's accounts now at their disposal, the couple hired 20 housekeepers and other staff, including 6 massage therapists, and moved millions of dollars into their personal bank accounts. They transferred $3 million to themselves, which they used to fund their new lifestyle of buying luxury items and hiring staff to work on their business ventures. And it didn't stop there. Flores and Moore then alienated Sawich from his family and friends. At one point, they even convinced Sawich's family that the doctor was missing and said they needed $4,682.72 for their expenses and the time they spent looking for him. While the pair enjoyed the high life, they arranged weekly ketamine injections to treat Sawich's depression, something the technicians tried to fight. Flores and Moore also gave him other recreational substances, including hallucinogens. Additionally, they made Sawich have 12 hours of massage treatments a day. During one of his last ketamine treatments, Sawich had a breakdown where he talked to himself, laughed, and forcibly pressed against his ears and eyes. A few days later, Flores gave the suffering doctor another popular hallucinogen, changed the two-factor authentication feature on Sawich's brokerage account, and withdrew another $2 million. Sawich ended up having another episode and kicked the couple out again. This time, Flores and Moore went to a luxury hotel where they watched Sawich's rapid deterioration on video cameras that were installed throughout the beach house. Although the doctor was suffering another mental health crisis, the pair didn't call the police until the massage therapist found him unresponsive. With Sawich out of the picture, Flores and Moore moved back into his home and withdrew even more money from his accounts. They claimed the doctor wanted them to have his home and a third of his estate. However, the victim's family filed a lawsuit against the couple that uncovered their scheme. Flores and Moore were arrested and charged with 12 counts. They face a maximum of 40 years for wire and mail fraud, 20 years for conspiracy to commit money laundering and laundering of monetary instruments, 10 years for transactional money laundering, and a mandatory 2-year prison sentence for aggravated identity theft. Number 2. Fattening up. Not all romance scams are completely about romance. This one falls somewhere in the sphere of friendship, romance, and just loneliness. A 52-year-old man who wanted to go by the alias Cy fell in love with a supposed woman named Jessica he met on WhatsApp. She conned him out of over $1 million, money that he needed for his wife and kids. Jessica randomly WhatsApp messaged Cy one day, claiming she'd found his number in her phone contacts and wondered if they were old colleagues. Cy responded, saying he didn't remember her, but she was engaging enough that they kept talking. Their conversations were originally about things like the food they liked, but progressed to more serious stuff like Cy's struggle to support his family and how the decision to send his father to hospice care haunted him. 2 months into their relationship, Cy was so-called pig butchered, a term that refers to the long game financial cons where scammers would fatten up their targets to take everything they have in the end, much like a butcher would with livestock. They convinced their targets to invest increasingly large sums because they believe the wins they're shown means they should invest more money. Once they're all in, that's when the butchering takes place. In this specific case, the crypto trading platforms look real, making victims believe they're legit and getting them excited about investing. When targets think they're about to make a massive return on their investment, the platform, the money, and the scammer disappears. Victims lose massive amounts of money, and these scams are so lucrative that they become increasingly common all over. Many of the scammers are victims themselves, having been lured to countries like Southeast Asia, thinking they're getting a better paying job. When job seekers arrive, the scammers take their new employees' passports and cell phones and threaten them with violence if they don't comply. Cy was one of many victims to fall prey to this type of scam, and between October and December 2021, he lost his life savings. The entire relationship played out through a WhatsApp conversation. Cy shared his concerns over his finances, and Jessica seemed to have a perfect solution. She claimed she was making boatloads of cash by trading on MetaTrader, an app you could download from the App Store. Jessica said she had insider trading tips from her uncle in Hong Kong, and since Cy's parents were from Hong Kong, he trusted her advice. Jessica guided Cy through a simulation on the app, during which he lost money. She told him not to worry and that he would quickly make it all back and more. Following Jessica's advice, Cy ran another simulated trade the next day and appeared to make $28,000. Encouraged him to invest the minimum amount, $10,000, reminding him that profits could help fix a lot of his financial worries. Cy thought about it overnight and texted her the next day, offering to put up $5,000 if she put up $5,000 too. Of course, Jessica refused, saying that Cy would have no reason to work to make it back if she just gave him the money. After some back and forth, Cy wired $10,000 to Coinbase. A few days passed, and Cy confided to Jessica that he was meeting with doctors to make decisions about the end of his father's life. He spoke about feeling like an outsider and that his role in the family was to support everyone financially. Jessica used the conversation to reinforce that Cy needed to make more money. She had to move money from his Coinbase account to crypto.com and buy $10,000 of Ethereum. After claiming her uncle texted her with insider trading information, she guided Cy through executing a trade. He sent her screenshots and she replied with further instructions. Cy didn't fully understand what he was doing, but he appeared to have doubled his money after the trade. He was hooked and couldn't wait to make more profits. He invested a further $50K and couldn't believe his luck as he watched his money grow. Sadly, the numbers he was watching climb were fake and created as part of a loophole in MetaTrader's setup. MetaTrader is a real app that enables legitimate trades with actual brokerages by offering licenses for its software. But it also allows licensees to use Virtual Dealer, a plugin that scammers can use to manipulate numbers, making people like Cy believe they're making money when they aren't. Now that Cy was completely on board, Jessica teased him with news of a big opportunity coming up and that he would make a huge profit if he could pull the cash together. Cy immediately liquidated some of his stock, selling $128,000 from his mutual fund portfolio. He bought more crypto with the proceeds, which he transferred to the crypto address that Jessica gave him. He changed the subject from investments in their WhatsApp to sharing his grief over his father's imminent passing. Jessica expressed concern, but really wanted to know if Cy would be at the hospital for the next few days because he'd be inaccessible. Hours later, Jessica messaged him with urgent financial advice, pushing him to sell more stock. Cy reminded her he was mourning his father and not really in the mood to deal with this right now. Jessica told him his father wanted him to be better. As Jessica prodded him to invest more funds, Cy secretly sold family assets and thought he'd made a $90,000 profit, which would be a 40% return. Cy had to prepare for the big market trade that Jessica hinted about and withdrew $200,000 from his home equity line of credit. By that point, he'd invested $440,000 of his own money, but it seemed worth it if he watched his investment grow to $2.2 million. When the critical trade occurred, though, his balance changed to negative $480,000. He messaged Jessica, who very curtly explained explained that he hadn't initially invested enough to turn the profit. Jessica said she could bring him back if he raised more funds. So Cy liquidated more of his assets and planned to raise another $150K at his father's funeral by secretly asking around. Cy raised and invested an additional $600,000 and watched his money grow to $1.1 million. Once he reached $1.8 million, Jessica said she'd finally teach him how to withdraw the money. But the next day, Cy's MetaTrader showed another negative balance. Jessica explained that he needed more money to compensate for the losses, but Cy was pretty much tapped out. He had invested and lost his parents' money, his daughter's tuition, and forced his wife to work twice as hard to support the family. With his life in complete shambles after losing over $1 million, Cy became suicidal. He sent Jessica a picture of himself in an ambulance on the way to a psych ward. She still told him it would be a sign of incompetence to hurt himself and that she couldn't do anything nor would do anything for him. Devastated, Cy begged Jessica for his money back, all the while cursing her out and wishing her family bad health for ruining his life. He did his best to escape financial ruin, and a family member set up a GoFundMe, although it only raised a fraction of his losses. In his last message to her, Cy offered to help if Jessica had been trafficked. While he didn't have the money to save her, he knew people who could help if she was working scams against her will. She never responded. Number 1. Gone again. Warehouse worker Dave Hazel sent £15,000 to his online girlfriend, except he later discovered he was talking to an African fraudster. Hazel had met Canadian Linda Smith on an online dating site in 2012. Despite only speaking through messages, the relationship developed quickly. Before long, Linda started sending Hazel frequent requests for money, which became more extreme as the relationship progressed. Hazel was convinced Linda was going to move from Canada to the UK to be with him. Having emptied all his savings for her, Hazel confronted Linda about the matter, but she disappeared from the internet. They spoke daily, but most interactions were through texts or online messages. He'd been desperate for a video call, but she refused. When they did speak on the phone, Linda seemed to have more of an English accent than a Canadian one. But Hazel fell hard for Linda and desperately wanted to start a family with her when she got to the UK. Moving countries isn't easy, so Linda asked Hazel for money for a visa, which cost £500. He wired her the money and 2 weeks later sent her an additional £500 for a medical check. The requests kept coming until Hazel spent over £15,000 thinking he was covering flights, visa complications, and more moving expenses. When Linda finally sent Hazel proof of the tickets, he saw she was flying from Ghana. Linda said she'd been visiting the country, but then Hazel got a call from Ghanaian immigration to say they detained her for possessing a large amount of money. His local bank confirmed that, based on the evidence of where he was sending the money, he was the victim of a scam. Since Hazel had voluntarily sent the funds, and there was no way for authorities to trace them, there was no way to get his money back. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you'd rather have to do: be a vegan for a year or spend a week in jail.